This is one of two panels by the Coalition for Civil Freedoms. The ICNA Social Justice Council very kindly gave us two panels. They are a member of the Coalition for Civil Freedoms, which is a human rights and social justice advocacy organization for Muslim war on terror prisoners in the United States. I was going to say that this is an unpopular topic, but clearly it's very popular today. We're talking entrapment cases, FBI manufactured crimes, and informants. So I'll just go ahead and give a shout out to the informants here tonight. And you know, you're probably working overtime, so maybe you're getting time and a half tonight.
You know who you are.
Yeah, they sure do. So hello. And I will give a brief introduction of myself and the topic. My name is Lina Al-Arian. I'm the co-director of the Coalition for Civil Freedoms. As I said, it's an advocacy organization for Muslim prisoners in the United States, war on terror prisoners. We do, we have a Ramadan gifts program. Each year we send $100 to prisoners' commissary accounts. So here's a quick pitch to get you guys to donate to support a prisoner. We have over 200 war on terror prisoners who need our support, so come find us. We also have a mock solitary confinement cell in the bazaar, so you can see some of the horrible conditions that prisoners are kept in. So we're here today to talk about these important cases. We have Ashley Young. She's the sister of Nicholas Young. I'll read her bio shortly. Kathy Manley, who's our legal director of the Coalition for Civil Freedoms. And I'm sure many of you know Hassan Shibly of CAIR-FL, Florida. We're very honored to have this great panel to talk to you tonight. How did the Coalition for Civil Freedoms get established? So my father was actually one of the first terrorism cases in the United States post 9/11. His name is Sami Al-Arian. He was a professor at the University of South Florida. After, it was 52 months of solitary confinement, of pretrial detention, horrible prison conditions where he was forced to be handcuffed behind his back, carry his legal documents that, as he was shackled to meet his attorneys, conditions that Amnesty International characterized as gratuitously punitive. Alhamdulillah, eventually he and his 3 other co-defendants came back, the jury came back in their case, didn't return a single guilty verdict. After his case eventually ended, of course, there were some other legal hoops we had to jump through. He was brought to Virginia to testify in another case. It was a perjury trap where a very vicious right-wing prosecutor who had a vendetta wanted to punish him because they didn't secure that conviction they wanted, kept bringing him. Eventually he was charged with criminal contempt, but released on house arrest. So literally the Coalition for Civil Freedom started while my father was on house arrest. He started it with other dedicated activists, such as Mel Underbaki, the director of the Coalition for Civil Freedom. She's in the audience. She's a wonderful person. She rallied the community in Tampa when nobody else did to defend my father and the other Muslim prisoners. And she founded the Friends of Human Rights, which eventually became a founding member of the coalition. There's Kathy Manley. She's an attorney for other Muslim prisoners in New York. And she and her community there, they joined, some other activists joined these meetings. So my father knew that he couldn't turn his back on other prisoners, and so we're keeping up the fight and we're continuing to advocate on behalf of prisoners. Today, many of you may have heard about the acquittal of Noor Salman, which, alhamdulillah, we're very proud to say that the coalition was one of the leading organizations that came out in support of her and led the advocacy for her on the ground and with the media. So we're very proud of our work. Ashley Young lives in Washington, D.C. and is an animal rights advocate who has been working in animal welfare for the majority of her adult life. She currently works for the Humane Rescue Alliance in our nation's capital. She has 2 undergraduate degrees in the arts from James Madison University. Her advocacy for animals shifted to humans when her older brother, Nick Young, was arrested on August 3rd, 2016 becoming the first law enforcement officer to be charged with terrorism. And if you wonder, what is the factor, he is Muslim, so that's why.
I'm excited to speak about my brother's case. Unfortunately, I wish it was under different circumstances. As Lena said, he is the first law enforcement officer to be arrested, charged, now found guilty, now in prison on charges of terrorism. He was charged with material support to terrorism, which if you pay attention to any of these cases, you will see that charge coming up over and over and over again. It's a very broad charge that can literally cover anything from A to Z, which makes it so difficult in these cases. But so to talk about my brother on August 3rd, 2016, he was arrested and charged with material support to terrorism for sending $245 worth of Google Play gift cards to a paid informant who posed as his friend for over 2 years. It is this Google Play gift card and his decision to send it that put him in prison for 15 years. And after 15 years, he has been sentenced to supervised release for another 15 years. So, my 94-year-old Nana was watching the news that morning and saw that my brother was arrested. My phone started ringing off the hook with reporters calling to see if I had any comments about my brother's arrest for terrorism. Of course, I had no idea what they were talking about. And one of my best friends called me and he explained to me what was going on before I had even spoken to my family. And he said, "You've got to get yourself together. Your brother will be appearing in federal court at 2 p.m. So I went there by myself in a room full of people from the government, people on the prosecution, reporters. I was the only person there by myself, and I saw my brother come out with his police uniform still partway on. He was arrested from work. So I have a bunch of notes and stuff that I wanted to go over. But the case goes back to the beginning, starting in 2010. It would be the first time that the FBI spoke to my brother. He met a man on his college campus that he used to go to. Only a few times someone introduced them. Once, the second time he saw him there, the guy asked him about becoming a police officer. My brother said, "Well, you're too young right now, but you can go into the cadet program. If you have an interest, here's my phone number." That was all he knew of this man. This man, his name is Zach Chesser. He was arrested in 2010, sentenced for 25 years for terrorism charges. The FBI called my brother out of work to speak to him, interrogate him. "Why did this man have your phone number?" I was so shocked when my brother told me. I was angry. I was pissed off in the manner in which they questioned him. And then I found out later that they had also gone to my mom's house. They lied to her. They made her cry, left her in tears, questioned her about my brother. And to my knowledge, that was the first and last time the FBI spoke to my brother. He did not tell me about their continued pursuits of them, probably because I had such a strong reaction to it in the first place. In 2011 would be the first time the FBI sent someone into my brother's life. It was an undercover FBI agent who became friends with him through his mosque. This man was going around to mosques in the area, taking classes, becoming friends with men. They met at someone's wedding. That's how long this man was here, posing as someone he wasn't, through the mosque. They had become such good friends with someone that he was invited to their wedding. Okay, so that's the first time my brother met him. They became friends immediately. The undercover FBI agent testified in court that it wasn't hard for him to become friends with Nick. They hit it off right off the bat. He said it felt like they were old friends. They hung out together. They talked about girls. They talked about school. They went to movies together. They prayed together. He up and disappeared out of my brother's life. In retrospect, we're able to look clearly and see what this man, the purpose in this man's life was, or in my brother's life was. At the time, my brother, he didn't really think anything of it. He didn't know why his friend didn't talk to him anymore. He didn't understand why his friend left town. So after, this man was in my brother's life for about a year and a half, and he testified that Nick never talked about anything that was a plan against the United States. He never made any threats. Basically, the well ran dry with him. And the FBI said, you know what, okay, you're done with him, there's nothing to see here, move on. But they didn't move on because a year and a half later, someone else was back in my brother's life. And this man maintained a friendship with my brother for over 2 years. At a different mosque in the area is how my brother met this friend. Okay, he was a paid informant by the FBI. My brother's best friend met him when this informant was sitting at the feet of the imam. The imam of this mosque introduced my brother's best friend to him. Okay, this is 2 mosques. 2 different men working for the FBI, infiltrating different friend groups, navigating through friend groups, and picking up on anyone who fall in their way. So one part of my brother's trial that was so important is that, first of all, we decided to go to trial. We know that only 2% of these cases end in anything other than a guilty verdict. But it didn't matter. We were going to trial. It did not matter. The biggest thing was that we were calling on the entrapment defense. That my brother would have never committed the crime if the government didn't induce it, if they didn't plan it, if they didn't give him the means to do it. He would never be speaking to anyone about these things if there wasn't the FBI speaking to him about it. So part of the entrapment defense lies on before the government first became involved in his life, did he have a predisposition to commit the crime he's charged with? The entrapment defense lies on that. Were they predisposed to commit the crime they're charged with before the government came into their lives? So after they ransacked my brother's house, they saw a bunch of Nazi stuff in my brother's house. They called the prosecutor and said, we don't know if this is within the scope of what we can take from his house, because that has nothing to do with the charged crime. He said, go ahead and take it. So they used this evidence to be able to draw a connection between Nazi, neo-Nazi, white supremacist inclinations to that being the reason why my brother would be predisposed to commit a crime of terrorism, militant Islamic terrorism, and white supremacist Nazis. So a bunch of the stuff they got from my brother's house was because he was part of a World War II reenactment group. For over 10 years, my brother was one of those people who would do reenactments. People would come, they watch, he would go to military bases. They're part of the Historical Reenactors Society. And his uniform, the stuff that they used in their reenactments, were used to say that he was a Nazi. In trial, when we wanted to talk about how 2 of the years that my brother was under investigation, he was dating and wanted to marry a Jewish girl, that stuff was not allowed into trial. The fact that my grandfather on my mom's side is Jewish, that was not allowed into trial. Okay? I just wanted to read you something that was in one of the motions. Mr. Young's trial saw the admission of dozens of pieces of Nazi, white supremacist, and anti-Semitic evidence over multiple trial days. The court admitted into evidence an image of a burning cross, which, by the way, was a CD cover of his, the art cover on a CD. That was used as evidence. A cartoon of Jewish people depicted as pigs, a dirtied Israeli flag, and the defendant costumed as a Nazi, standing before an oversized swastika. Mr. Young was neither charged with nor investigated for a hate crime. Such evidence has never before been admitted into federal court for a militant Islam terrorist crime, and quite possibly in any other type of federal litigation. Inflammatory, repulsive, and prejudicial, these materials challenge an itemized accounting of the trial's fundamental fairness. There is no case law to cite on this issue, as the courts have never admitted such evidence. Its admission here was a category error. On top of that, the only way that they could connect these two things was that the government paid an expert witness to write a report on my brother. They paid him almost $20,000 to write a report that has never been written before on my brother. And the court allowed this in as expert witness testimony. The expert witness in trial offered testimony based on information from blogs in a foreign language that he could not read. He admitted that he had them translated through Google Translate. It had never been the subject of being a Nazi white supremacist, which is why he became an Islamic terrorist, had never before been contested in a civil or criminal trial on any matter. It's never been testified about hypothesized white supremacist militant Islam conversion, and has never been the subject of any expert testimony in any federal court. So like I said, unfortunately, trial did not end up the way we wanted it to. A 6-year investigation was crammed into 5 days, and the jury found my brother guilty, and he was sentenced to 15 years, and then another 15 years supervised release. I had never been aware or taken the time to be aware of any of these types of trials, any of these types of arrests. So this was definitely, when I started reading about things, I was floored. I was disgusted. I was ashamed. These trials, these arrests, they're un-American. They go against the civil freedoms that we've been entitled to, that we're supposed to have in America. So I just wanted to speak real quickly, because I remember speaking with Lena's older sister, Layla, and realizing that their father's case happened a good 10 years more before my brother's case. And I wanted to ask her, why did not more people hear about this issue, these cases, the injustice? And you guys have been trying to speak about it for years and years and years. How come nobody's heard about this? And she looked at me and said, because nobody cares about Muslims. I refuse to believe that. To this day, I refuse to believe it. I don't accept it. I don't think it's because people don't care, it's because they don't know, okay? And so seeing people here who are willing to listen today, it gives me a lot of hope. Because when my brother was arrested, nobody came. All his friends over all the years, only a few of them stood up for him. My brother was part of 2 communities. He was a cop. He had been a cop for 13 years. And he was also a Muslim, had been Muslim for 10 years. And both communities turned their back on my brother. Nobody wanted anything to do with us. I remember calling some of my brother's friends. I remember one of their dads telling me whatever I was trying to find to stop and leave everyone alone. Not to look to call anyone else. The secrecy problem in these trials doesn't just happen in the courtroom, it happens in the community because people are too scared to talk about it. But then we sit in trial, we ask a jury, we ask a judge to care. Why should any of them care if people from the community won't show that they care? Okay? So it's a systemic problem. It's not just the courts, it's not just the government. It's us as a people being able to have to look at our moral compass and decide what for humanity, we have to stand up for something, okay?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Ashley's brother, his nickname, I don't think you mentioned, is Officer Friendly. In 15 years on the force,
Yeah.
not a single time did he ever use force with anybody. People loved him. He was the kind of person that got along with everybody, that always smiled. And it's very sad that these informants target the best among us, people with the kindest hearts who let you in. I just wanted to gauge the information that the room has. I wanted to ask how many of you know estimated how many paid informants there are infiltrating our communities. If anybody has a number, can raise your hand or shout it out. How many informants do you think are currently infiltrating our communities? Paid informants. How many? 50?
15,000.
Over 15,000 are currently infiltrating the community. And a part of it, in my view, is the government wants to depoliticize our communities, right? So, you can't have a political opinion without it becoming a violent political opinion. So I saw this meme one time. If somebody's talking to you about violent jihad, that person is an informant. So stay aware, stay vigilant, and don't let anybody fool you. I thought it was kind of funny when we were sitting. It's like the non-Muslims on this side and the Muslims on that side. I think we need to switch it up, yeah. It's not good optics. We're all here allies. Next, I'm going to introduce Kathy, and there's a term that we use often in our work. It's called preemptive prosecution, and this is a term that you guys need to understand when you hear about manufactured plots, because what is it to manufacture a plot, to be charged with these material support cases when the government invents it from A to Z? So I'm going to turn it over to Kathy in a minute, but not before I read her bio, so 1 second. Okay, Kathy Manley, as I said earlier, is the legal director of the Coalition for Civil Freedoms. Now a solo practitioner, Kathy was at Kindlin? Okay, all right, Shankton, okay. She's an attorney and she was one for many years. Kathy's main emphasis is criminal defense and constitutional rights. She concentrates on appeals and has written many winning briefs before the New York State Court of Appeals. Kathy works with many civil rights groups, including Project Salam, the Muslim Solidarity Committee, and the National Lawyers Guild. She is also the vice president of the Albany chapter of the New York Civil Liberties Union. Kathy has received many awards for her work, including the Carol S. Knox Award from the New York Civil Liberties Union Capital Region chapter in 2015, among others. Please help me welcome Kathy Manley.
I got involved in this in 2004 when I was part of the legal team for an imam in Albany, New York named Yassin Araf. He and his co-defendant, Mohammed Hussein, were entrapped in a FBI sting operation that was really ludicrous. They were totally innocent. It was bizarre because in sting operations, usually there's always recorded conversations with the informant, and usually they get the targets for various reasons. They get them to say things that sound bad on the tapes, but in this case, that never happened. There was like no evidence against Yassin, except there was a lot of secret evidence that the judge got to see, and so he made all these rulings against Yassin, and like we made a motion to dismiss the case based on illegal wiretapping, and not only the prosecution's response, but the judge's decision was completely classified, so we couldn't even read them. Like, that totally destroys the Sixth Amendment right to confront evidence against you, any kind of due process. So basically, I won't go into all the details of that case, or even hardly any of them, because we don't have time. But it really opened my eyes to how unfair the system can be when it's really a vendetta against a certain group of people that the government is paranoid about. They are afraid after 9/11, they became terrified that, oh, any Muslim could be doing this to us, and there became, like, they didn't care about all the damage they did to innocent people. The idea was what Dick Cheney talked about with the 1% solution, where if there's a 1% chance that somebody might in the future do something against this country, we have to get rid of them now. We have to lock them up or deport them or something. And that's kind of the mentality that the FBI has been using in these cases. Not all of them, but a lot of them. And I didn't realize that back then. I just thought, wow, I started learning how unfair it can be, but I thought maybe this is an isolated example. I didn't realize that there were so many other cases until we started studying them. It was, 2010, Lena's brother, Ali, came looking for us when there was a peace conference in Albany, New York, which is where I'm from. And the reason they knew about us is because Yassin Araf, after he had been convicted, he started writing the story of his life. He's Kurdish from Iraq, and he wrote the story of his life called Son of Mountains. And we self-published it and got it out there, and it sold about 1,000 copies or so, but one of them we sent to, Lena's sister Layla ended up with it, and from Al Jazeera. And since her dad, Sammy, was in house arrest in that apartment, he saw the book and looked at it and said, oh, wow, we need to get in touch with, because we wrote about his case, too, in the...
The funny part is like how somebody put it on my sister's desk. Like, you sent it to the network, but somebody was like, oh, she'll care about this.
That was great. I mean, just serendipity. So that's how we got connected. We met Ali, and then we came to meet Dr. Sami in the house because he was under house arrest. And then we formed the Coalition for Civil Freedoms in 2010. And one of the things that we worked on was studying these cases, like really studying them, like what happened in the other cases, what is the government doing and how is it doing it, and did these people commit crimes? Like, so we actually had a list that the government came up with around late 2010 or 2011. There was a list of 299 cases that the Department of Justice called foreign terrorism or terrorism cases. And guess what? They were all Muslim, like 99% Muslim, and they were all convicted. And because this preemptive prosecution model had been used in them. But I thought, all right, well, 299 cases, maybe like at least half of them probably or more like actually must have committed real terrorism crimes. But when I looked into these cases, and this was, so there's been a bunch since, we need to update it, but this is 2001 to 2010, only four of those 299 cases were people who had committed violent acts within the US or had even attempted to. And about another 8 had either committed violent acts outside of the U.S. or attempted to. And the rest did nothing, really. It was just either material support for terrorism, like this sending a Google Play card, and that was a sting operation. A lot of times material support charges are in sting operations too. So there's a lot of the cases are involve material support charges where you don't have to have any intent to do anything violent, according to the Supreme Court. Just material support in any way to any designated terrorist organization, which is a group that whatever the government decides is a terrorist group, which is problematic and to say the least. And you don't even have to, you could be helping the group to work out its differences peacefully, and you can still be convicted of material support for terrorism. So a lot of the cases are sting operations, and Ashley talked about how there's supposed to be an entrapment defense, but there really isn't an entrapment defense anymore, at least not for Muslims, because, and actually the jury instructions that the judge is supposed to read to the jury in these cases help to destroy the entrapment defense. This happened, I think one of the earliest cases when it happened was in our case in Albany, when Yassin wasn't even arguing entrapment because he didn't even know anything illegal was going on. He really didn't. But his co-defendant had some idea something. He wasn't supporting it. It was a loan. It was very complicated. The guy was saying he wanted to help him, and he didn't have to pay back all the money he loaned. It was supposed to be money laundering, but they didn't understand that. But anyway, the judge told the jury that predisposition, if there was no predisposition, if the people hadn't had any ideas or behavior before the informant came into their life that showed they supported terrorism, that's okay, because another form of predisposition is if they don't back out of the plot before they get arrested. This is what the juries get told. So if somebody did back out and not come back to the informant, they're probably not even going to be arrested, at least not in a sting operation. So there is no entrapment defense. That's what happened in a case called the Newburgh 4. In same informant, Shahed Hussein, who was in the case in Albany, they sent him after he was so successful in convicting 2 totally innocent people in Albany. They sent him down a couple hours down towards New York City in a little town called Newburgh, New York, an impoverished town. And they sent him into a mosque with no evidence against anybody in the mosque. Now the FBI, if you ask them, they'll say they don't do that. Well, they did that, and they do that all the time. They sent this guy into the mosque. He hung out there for a year, didn't find anybody who even wanted to talk to him when he would try to say whatever he was saying. He talked about how rich he was and how he was involved in this and that, and he had all these fancy cars. He eventually got kicked out of the mosque. He got nowhere. He was in the parking lot of this mosque in Newburgh when he started talking to this guy named James Cromedy, who was kind of a con artist himself. So it was like these 2 con artists talking to each other. But James was in big trouble because Shahed Hussein had something over on him, because James was trying to, Shahed Hussein's like this, oh, I'm this really rich guy, we can work together, I can give you all this stuff, I don't know. I can give you a car, I can set you up in business, I work for this group called JEM, Jaish-e-Mohammed. And James, who had no political feelings at all, wasn't political, had no support of terrorism, nothing like that. He started lying and saying, oh yeah, I'm a terrorist, I did all this stuff in Afghanistan. Like, he just made this stuff up, just lied, said that he had set off bombs. Like, he had never done anything like that. He was like a drug dealer, and he was just trying to con money out of Shahed Hussein. And this went on for a while, where they were trying to con each other, and Shahed Hussein's like, oh yeah, you gotta come up with a plot, but James couldn't even figure out how to read the map, and it was like really crazy. And so Shahed Hussein had to come up with all the details, pick the targets, and then say, well, we need some other people because you can't have a conspiracy with just an informant. They wanted a conspiracy too. That's a very strong law in federal court, conspiracy. They could do a lot with conspiracy charges. So they wanted a few other people involved too. But after a while, James was getting sick of this guy, and he just like wanted nothing to do with him, so he just disappeared for a few months. Finally, Shahid Hussein gets him on the phone again and says, oh, brother, I promised you $250,000 and you don't want it? Which he had never promised that before. And James is like, oh, I'm in, yeah, okay, yeah. Right, and Shahid Hussein didn't know, because he didn't have his recording device turned on. He could turn it on and off at will. He didn't know that obviously he should have thought about it, but he's not too smart sometimes. But anyway, it worked out for the government anyway. But he didn't know that the government was tapping James Cromity's phone. So this conversation was recorded. And it eventually, like right before the trial, the government should have turned it over to the defense like right away as soon as they realized they had it, but they didn't. But this was a good bunch of defense lawyers, and they finally got this thing saying, I offered you $250,000 and you didn't want it. And then James says, oh, okay, I'm in again. That is like the definition of what entrapment should be. That if that's not entrapment, there is no entrapment, right? Eventually, at the end, he gets 3 other guys to come in at the last minute and offers them $5,000 each. That's also entrapment, right? And they had no predisposition either. And I was hopeful that they would be acquitted, but no, they got convicted. They got convicted and sentenced to 25 years each. Yeah. So this is the kind of thing that the government can get away with because they have this fear that people have of Muslims. These guys were sort of Muslim. They weren't particularly Muslim. I mean, like in our case in Albany, Shahid Hussein came to my client, the imam, and the guy, his co-defendant who founded the mosque, and said, teach me about Islam, because he didn't really know much. But with the Newberg case, Shahid Hussein was supposed to be the expert. He couldn't even name the 5 pillars of Islam. These guys knew less than that. I mean, they had sort of converted to Islam in prison, but they didn't really practice it. They didn't really know much. So this was a case where the government wasn't even paranoid about these guys as Muslims. They just wanted a case. They just wanted another victory in the war on terror. They sent this guy down to the mosque for a year, and this is all he could come up with. And they poured hundreds of thousands of dollars into this case, and they got their 25 years each for these poor hapless guys. So that's an extreme example, but there's so many examples of sting operations where there's vulnerable young men. A lot of them are mentally ill. Some of them, I mean, an informant can do a lot with somebody who's mentally ill and suggestible. They can get them to say a lot of things and show them pictures of atrocities and get them all riled up and, you know, just kind of push them along the path that they want. And then they get arrested and they get charged with material support and conspiracy if there's somebody else involved. And then some of them were even found not to be competent to stand trial because they were so mentally ill. And I don't know if you know, but that's like, you have to be really, really mentally ill to be found not competent for trial. I mean, and I just looked in our database and saw that there were several examples of that just recently in these so-called ISIS cases. So there's a lot of tools that the government uses. We're going to have questions and answers at the end, okay? And I'll probably wrap up my part, and then we'll finish up with Hassan. But so they use sting operations, they use material support laws, they use secret evidence in a lot of these cases where the defense doesn't even get to see the evidence that the judge gets to see and makes decisions based on that evidence. They have experts, so-called experts, that are just people who are going to say whatever the prosecution wants them to say. And like ours was Evan Coleman, the so-called Google expert, because he would just go on Google a little bit before the trial and look the stuff up. And they have this sensationalist evidence, like this Nazi stuff in his case. And sometimes they'll show videos of people blowing up buses, which have nothing to do with the case, but they're saying, oh, you supported this group, that this group does this sometimes, so therefore it's connected to you, and you get to show this to the jury. They just have a lot of techniques that, in combination with the fear, allows them to convict people with basically no evidence. And people need to be aware of that more. And so we've been trying to raise awareness about that with the Coalition for Civil Freedoms. And also we've been trying to work with the families. That's how we met Ashley. Well, we met her, I don't know how we first connected to you.
I
but
found out about you guys because
Yeah.
I was doing a ton of research and
Okay.
I reached out to you guys first.
So she reached out to us, and then we invited her to our family conference, because a lot of the family members in these cases, I mean, the defendants are innocent, and their family members are totally innocent. Even if the defendant did something, little thing wrong, the family members certainly are totally innocent and should not be ostracized from their communities, but all too often that's what happens. Sometimes they're turned away from their mosque, nobody wants to talk to them, they lose their friends, and it's really tragic for these people who've sometimes lost their breadwinners. The breadwinner of the family may be the one that's locked up. So one of the things we do every year is we get together with the family members from these cases, and it's sort of a support group, and we try to help them empower each other and learn to work together and to fight back and to educate people about this stuff and tell their stories. So that was so Ashley came, and we did some lobbying. Very difficult environment, but we did it. It went better than I thought, because there we have real people telling their stories, and some of these aides were listening to that. So another thing we do that we're fundraising for now is Ramadan. Every Ramadan we give commissary gifts to the people who are in prison, $100 in their commissary account. Some of these people have nothing in their commissary account, so that's something that we've been doing every year, and it's very appreciated by these people who are really, really isolated in prison and really having a rough time. So I guess I'll end it there.
He's the Chief Executive Director of CAIR Florida. He holds a law degree from the University of Buffalo School of Law. He lectures regularly on issues relating to Islam, American Muslims, and civil rights. I'm proud to announce that he and CAIR Florida are also now members of the Coalition for Civil Freedoms, and he's a board member. He's been featured all over the news. I'm sure some of you have seen him on CNN. He does a good camera analysis. He's a very well-known Muslim figure. So please help me welcome Hassan Shibly.
بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن سيدنا محمدا عبد رسوله. جزاك الله خيرا تسلينا for hosting this great program. My greatest appreciation, both you, Kathy and Ashley, both of you, for the tremendous work you're doing, you for speaking out about the horrible injustice your families face. And Kathy, I bother her many times a year. Whenever the FBI knocks on the door of a member of the Muslim community in the New York area, I give her a ring, and she sends them running, and they don't come back. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. And it's critical that we recognize the challenges our community faces, and also recognize the opportunities we have to stand up for ourselves, to be proud of our faith and our identity, and to give back to this country. The truth of the matter is this: the greatest gift that we have is our faith. It is our connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We came by the will of Allah, and we exist always with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with us, with Him witnessing us. وَهُوَ مَعَكُمْ أَيْنَمَا كُنْتُمْ. He is with you wherever you are. He is closer to us than we are to each other right now, witnessing every thought of ours, everything we see, say, and hear, and ultimately we will return to Him. And Islam is that vehicle by which we can come to know our Creator before we return to our Creator. So it is the greatest gift that we have. And I emphasize that because too often, out of our fear, out of abuse, out of Islamophobia, out of fear of discrimination and harassment, out of fear of the FBI, we may actually hold back from practicing our faith, when indeed our faith is the greatest gift that we have, because it's the way we can know our Creator. So never let fear of others get between you and having a connection with the Creator of the heavens and the earth. That's the first and foremost point. My brothers and sisters, people sometimes sacrifice their faith, or they sacrifice for their faith. They sacrifice their relationship with Allah, or they sacrifice for their relationship with Allah. They sacrifice their deen, or they sacrifice for their deen. But if you truly appreciate what a gift your faith is, you will never sacrifice it out of fear of others. And the fact of the matter is that alhamdulillah, as Muslims in America, we have absolutely no excuse not to practice our faith. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is with us, and the law is also with us if we understand it, and we defend it, and we stand strong for it. The truth of the matter is America is one of the best places in the world to be a practicing Muslim, despite the injustices that we've heard, and the injustices that we will talk about, and that we will cover. And inshallah, I will share with you some information on how to protect against. So never be scared to practice your faith. If you can't practice Islam here, you can't practice it anywhere. Here the FBI comes to speak to me. Hey, where were you? And my answer is none of your damn business. And they can't mess with that, brothers and sisters. But I tried that in Syria, and I'll be meeting Allah very soon. That's the truth of the matter.
But also, maybe don't say none of your damn business.
Not until you go to law school, at least. But no,
only him.
We'll get into that. But that really is a testament to the principles of liberty and justice that this country offers. And we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about protecting against, how to protect. Really, there's two things to protect against. Protect yourself from being an FBI informant, and protect yourself from being the subject of a sting. If you can identify how to protect against these two things, you've got nothing to worry about. But otherwise, if you don't, then everybody has something to worry about. During the elections, I got calls from over 100 people across the country who were visited by the FBI. And the agents admitted to me that they had no reason to question these Muslims. And they were asking them, do you know any terrorists? Do you fund terrorism? Do you know anybody who funds terrorism? I said, why the heck would they know anybody like that? Just because of their religion? That's unconstitutional that you are targeting people simply because of their religion. And what offends me about the FBI, what offends me about what they're doing, is it offends me as an attorney and as a Muslim and as an American long before it offends me as a Muslim. It's against the principles of liberty and justice that the U.S. Constitution is supposed to protect. So my humble advice to you on the solution, and then I'll get into 10 reasons why you should never speak to the FBI without a lawyer. Because I really believe that if we never speak to the FBI without a lawyer, and we never speak to anybody about something unethical or haram, then we got nothing to worry about. Really. Those are the two key factors. We need to, number one, never speak to the FBI without a lawyer. And somebody's coming to you, talking to you about breaking the law. Well, they're asking you to disobey Allah, and that's something we don't do. That's something we don't do. So if you can protect against those two things, inshallah, you'll be safe. My request, really, and my humble request for all of our brothers and sisters, because I see such a vibrant room, I'm excited to see the young faces in the room. Our solution for our success in this life and the next is very simple. Follow the sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Love the sunnah. The sunnah is the way that Allah loves. And when you're connected to the sunnah, you're simply connected to that which the creator of the heavens and the earth loves. So connect with the sunnah. Connect with the ulama, the scholars, who are the inheritors of the Prophet. And have the absolute best akhlaq and character and conduct you can. So that when people see you, they fall in love with you. And they fall in love with the message that you come with. And then serve humanity. Fearlessly serve humanity. Speak truth to power. Stand forward against injustice. That is the best weapon against Islamophobia, against FBI abuse, against all of that. Being proud of your faith and your identity. Being humble with humanity and serving God's creation. That is the best weapon against Islamophobia, brothers and sisters. And that's what we need. And recognize that Allah has really chosen you for an honorable position as a young American Muslim today. Islamophobia is, in fact, one of the greatest threats that this country faces. It is a tool that is used to undermine freedom, as we heard about. It is a tool that is used to escalate conflict in the world, leading to the deaths of billions of civilians. You think the millions of Muslim children in Iraq, Palestine, Afghanistan, throughout the Muslim world that have been killed through your tax dollars. You think the public would tolerate the countless bloody children and women blown up by US bombs if they saw them as human, if they saw them as equal? Madeleine Albright was asked about the 500,000 children killed in Iraq, and she said, I think the price is worth it. You think she would say the same about 5 blonde American Christian children? No, she wouldn't. But what Islamophobia does is it dehumanizes Muslims. So locking up for decades in jail is okay, and blowing them up overseas is okay. That's how dangerous Islamophobia is, undermining freedom in America for everyone. You know, in Tennessee, they tried to pass a law practicing Islam as treason, punishable by 20 years in jail. Undermining freedom at home and escalating conflict overseas. So by challenging Islamophobia, what can we do? we can keep America free at home, we can promote peace in the world, and most importantly, we can connect people with their Creator, and therefore strengthen our connection with our Creator that we will return to. And who's in the best position to challenge Islamophobia? It's us, American Muslims, here today, proudly holding on to our faith with the best akhlaq and character and conduct, and serving those around us. That's the way we change the tide, inshallah. But we can't do that if we're afraid of the FBI. We can't do that if we're afraid we're going to get caught up in the next FBI sting or the next informant problem. So I want to speak to you very briefly today now on the defense. That was the first beginning of my talk was the offense. Let's talk a little bit about the defense. First of all, the Fifth Amendment of the United States Constitution gives all of you the right never to speak to the FBI without a lawyer. Only the ignorant or the arrogant. Again, only the ignorant or the arrogant, only the ignorant or the arrogant speak to the FBI without a lawyer. That's the bottom line. I'm sorry, if you speak to the FBI without a lawyer, you're ignorant or arrogant. That's my professional legal opinion to you.
Never do it, ever.
Never.
Under no circumstances. You won't be the one person who, will make it.
Yeah, exactly. Only the ignorant is you don't know their tactics. You think they're just looking for the bad guys. You don't know that one of the FBI's training manuals, actually one of their training sessions, they were trained that Al-Qaeda is not your enemy, Islam is your enemy. They were literally trained that in their training. That doesn't reflect all agents. There's many good agents out there, but it's not your job to know who the good agent and bad agent is. It's your lawyer's job. And alhamdulillah, through organizations like CAIR, the Coalition, MLFA, many others, you have free lawyers who will represent you free of charge whenever the FBI comes. And I tell you, generally, 90% of the time when the FBI gets a call from us, they just don't call back and they don't bother the person again. So don't speak to the FBI without a lawyer, because remember, this goes to my second point. First point is you have the Fifth Amendment. Second point is, if you've done nothing wrong, you can't talk yourself out of trouble. You can only talk yourself into trouble. Because you're innocent till proven guilty. You don't have anything to prove. So if anyone wants to speak to you, again, it's none of your business. Yes, what you say, and this is the practice, hey, can we speak to you? Sure, with my lawyer present. I don't want to speak to you without my lawyer. Let me have your business card, and then contact CAIR, contact MLFA, contact the Coalition. There's many groups out there that will give you free legal representation. And generally, once they get a call from us, they just don't even follow up. That's the general rule. So what do you say? I don't want to speak to you without my lawyer. I don't want to speak to you without my lawyer. Let me hear it. I don't want to speak to you without my lawyer. And CAIR will provide free lawyers for you. Alhamdulillah. I get calls from all over the country. Literally, people are calling me like terrified. Brother, you'll never believe what happened. The FBI was just at my door. I'm so scared. My life is over. I'm like, all right, man, just calm down. Give me his number. Hey, Agent Smith, what's up? Just leave this guy alone. Literally, it's generally that simple. I think a little bit oversimple, but that's pretty much it. That's how the calls go. And that's what we charge $300 an hour for in private practice, literally. But we do it for free to CAIR, and Kathy just does this pro bono. God bless her.
Unless it gets beyond that.
Unless it gets beyond that. But generally it doesn't. Generally it doesn't. So just remember, you can't talk yourself out of trouble. Because what happens is when you sit and speak with them, they fill out a Form 302. That becomes the official record of that conversation. You don't get to see that form. And if anything written on that form contradicts what you told them, or contradicts something you say later, or contradicts truth, they say, oh, you lied to us. And guess what? Lying to us is punishable by 5 years in jail. But we got a way out of it if you spy on the mosques for us, and the hookah lounges and the halal restaurants. Because guaranteed you're going to find the Muslim in one of those three areas. The hookah lounge, the restaurant, or the, hey man, alhamdulillah, deen and dunya, I guess. So they know where to look. They know where to look. But the point is, that's how they recruit informants, by speaking. And when you speak, you contradict. And when you contradict, they use that as leverage. One of the well-respected imams that I know, the FBI showed him a picture of a naked woman and said, because they know our community will buy and pass on and Facebook and tweet every rumor they hear, and they love to gossip, and they love to get involved in things that are not their business. May Allah, really shame on us. Shame on us of how we use our social media. Some people go to hell because of their sins, and other people go to hell because of talking about what they think are other people's sins. Really. Be careful how you use your social media. Be careful how you use your tongue. Nothing drags people in hell more than their tongue. Be careful. But the FBI knows we don't know our hadith, right? We don't know the hadith that say don't backbite, don't gossip, assume the best, don't believe everything you hear. We know we're disconnected from those ahadith. So the FBI goes to an imam and says, hey imam, you could be the next Facebook scandal. We're going to show you these pictures of these naked women. They're going to testify that you're using them for prostitution unless you work for us. True story. They play these games. COINTELPRO, our African American brothers and sisters have been dealing with it for generations. They sent Martin Luther King a letter, kill yourself or we're going to expose you as some deviant. So this isn't anything new. They use these leverage tactics to try to turn people into informants, but again, it all starts when you speak to them without a lawyer. You gain nothing by speaking to them without a lawyer. You have everything to lose, however. Silence cannot be used against you. If you say, I don't want to speak to them, you can't, because it's a constitutional right put in to protect the innocent. Now, is the FBI allowed to lie to you?
Yes.
Yes. Are you allowed to lie to them? No. How stupid. I was going to say just stupid. How stupid is it to talk to somebody who's legally allowed to lie to you, and you're not allowed to lie to them, and lying to them can turn you into an informant? أَفَلَا تَعْقِلُونَ, Allah says, don't use your intellect. The Prophet ﷺ said, مَنْ صَمَتَ نَجَى, whoever is quiet is safe. Again, this isn't to protect innocent people, guilty people. This is to protect innocent people from being caught up and having their arms twisted to become informants, to find vulnerable individuals and twist their arms for them to agree to commit crimes they never otherwise would have on their own, so that they can justify the billions they receive, and so that they can continue to paint the Muslim community as a threat to gain more power and authority. That's how the Islamophobia industry within government works. So remember, FBI is allowed to lie to you, you're not allowed to lie to them, and I want to give you two examples of this FBI abuse. Of cases that I worked on, and then give you a couple more lessons, and then we'll have some time for the Q&A, inshallah. Very simple case. I don't want you to be like Ibrahim Todashev. Ibrahim Todashev is with Allah right now. He was a young man, and subhanAllah, FBI wanted to speak to him. So he thought, like many of you think, oh, I got nothing to hide. Sure, I'll be happy to speak with you. The FBI agents interrogated him in his home for 6 hours in Orlando. After 6 hours, Ibrahim ended up with 3 bullet wounds in the back, 3 in the front, and once right in the top of the head, making sure he was done for good. After 6 hours of interrogation in his home. He thought he had nothing to hide. He ended up dead. What would he have lost if he said, you know what, I don't want to speak to you without my lawyer, and let us deal with it? If the qadr were different, he might have still been alive today. It literally cost him his life. Now, what was crazy was when we investigated, and here's the problem, our community is so scared. Like, nobody in the community wanted to go near that case. And we did, and I got a call from like the Washington Post, from like African American journalists thanking us for standing up. They're like, yo, if it was an African American man killed, the African American community would have stood up, but you Muslims are too scared to stand up for your own. What's wrong with you? Thank you for standing up. So alhamdulillah, we did an investigation, and in our investigation we discovered that the agent who shot and killed Ibrahim was sued twice and investigated 4 times for beating up suspects, beating up witnesses, and falsifying evidence. That's the kind of guy who's knocking on the doors trying to interrogate Muslims. What we further discovered was that before killing him, they told his friends, you guys either spy on the mosques, hookah lounges, and halal restaurants, or we're going to take away your paperwork and throw you in jail. Those are the kind of things we deal with. And it's unfortunate. We've seen in another case that I worked on in Orlando, they were trying to give an Imam Abu Tawbah 20 years in jail. 20 years in jail as a terrorist. And the only evidence that they had, just to show you the kind of prosecution they're going with, only evidence they had that he was a terrorist was that he taught the Quran, encouraged others to go study the Quran in Mauritania, and had a library of 10,000 Islamic books in his computer. 5 of which the government didn't like. And I told the U.S. attorney, literally in the middle of the courtroom, I yelled at him, I said, what the heck is wrong with you, man? I said, literally, you're going to regret this case for the rest of your life. You're a lawyer, I'm a lawyer. We took an oath to protect the Constitution. You're shredding the Constitution to pieces. You're prosecuting people, trying to give them decades in jail for exercising their First Amendment right to practice their religion, and to read, and to write, and to speak. Alhamdulillah, and again in that case, we couldn't get any of the Muslim community in the courtroom to support the Imam. The Imam, I saw him in jail, he hugged me, he said, you're the first Muslim I've seen in years. I was in solitary confinement, I saw his legs bleeding because he was in chains 24/7 that rubbed off his skin, so he was always bleeding in solitary confinement. And after we visited him in jail, his situation turned around, alhamdulillah, 180 degrees. Because this needs light, it needs pressure, it needs to know that we will not take this quietly. And alhamdulillah, we testified in his defense, and the judge quoted us verbatim when he released him from prison. He cries every time he sees us. He says, if it wasn't for CAIR, it wasn't for you guys, I'd still be in jail for the next 2 decades. What? For teaching people the Quran. And my fear was if they convicted him, they would convict all of us. But again, in that case, they had an informant. And it all started when that person spoke to the FBI without a lawyer. Look, if you're breaking the law, they're going to get you. They don't need informants and agent provocateurs. And that's not my concern if you're breaking the law. But my concern is the countless innocent people who were taken advantage of, who were entrapped, and who's had their arms twisted to become agent provocateurs. So, unfortunately, we did an audit of the kind of training material the FBI received, and we found thousands of pages of anti-Muslim literature within the FBI training material. So look, it's not your job to know, is this a good agent or a bad agent? Is he getting good training or bad training? What's his intentions? Your job is to be a human being, a Muslim, an American. Be yourself. And when the FBI calls you, when they show up at your place of employment, say, listen, man, I'm a busy businessman. I'm a busy teacher. I'm a busy student. I don't got time for you. But my lawyer does. So give me your business card and my lawyer will call you. That's it. 90% of our problems will be solved if you just acted about that. You have no excuse. Only the ignorant and the arrogant speak to the FBI without a lawyer. And listen, I'm going to be very frank. Right now, who wants to speak to Trump? The FBI. And what's Trump's lawyers telling him? Don't. He's the president. Sorry, I've avoided calling him that for I don't know, almost a year from now. I feel a little sick in my stomach. But he's supposed to be the commander-in-chief, and even his lawyers say, don't speak to the FBI without a lawyer. So who are me and you to speak to them without a lawyer? Don't speak to the FBI without a lawyer, you'll be fine, inshallah. You got nothing to fear, nothing to worry about. Don't hold yourself back. Be involved, be present, be visibly Muslim. Be a representative of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Visibly, outwardly, and through your service. And let your service be a means of people falling in love with Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Let that be your gratitude that Allah guided you. And be a mercy for humanity. Rasulullah was sent as a mercy, and this country needs mercy. Be that mercy by being unapologetically Muslim and in service of humanity. And don't worry about the FBI. Just don't speak to them without a lawyer. Thank you. And God bless you.
A lot of these trials happen all over the country, and oftentimes they go unnoticed. The defendant is often there, on an entrapment case or for, ideological leanings, but not actual criminal activity. And nobody shows up at these trials. They're completely alone. Their families are abandoned. They're shunned. I experienced that personally. It wasn't until the non-Muslim community came out in support of my father and that things started, slowly unraveling in his case, that then Muslims showed up. So get there early. The work has to start. These people are still your community. Oftentimes, if not all the time, the case is flimsy. It's built on a lie. Do not be afraid. Come out there in large numbers. Bring your friends. We often publicize these trials as they're happening. What's nice about this convention is that it attracts people from all over the country. So please come to our booth in the bazaar, sign up to our list. If something is going on, we will let you know. If there's anybody in Ohio here, there's a conspiracy case happening in about 2 weeks, April 17th. And one of the pieces of evidence literally is Anwar al-Awlaqi CDs. We all know what he is to the U.S. government and what he represents, but before he was, killed, he was also just like any imam, everybody used to listen to him, and so having these CDs about religious stuff wasn't necessarily a crime, but then, it's getting used in these cases to paint a sinister picture. So don't be afraid of the facts, just show up and investigate. You have a justice system and a jury there that's looking at the facts, but when these defendants are alone, a jury is more likely to just assume their guilt. So partner with non-Muslim organizations, local churches, whatever organizations that care about social justice and human rights, talk to them about these cases, because all it takes is educating them about them, and pretty soon people see that they are often based on Islamophobia.